Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of the Mind, Body, Soul Transformation Podcast. It's raining pretty heavily here, so I'm hoping the background noise isn't too distracting for either of us. But let's dive in because I got 2 episodes that I need to record today. This episode is all about the tension between science and spirituality. And I've touched on this a little bit in previous episodes, particularly around the idea that as someone that has a very scientific background, I am a scientist in terms of my career. I work within a science-based organization and facility. It has been something that I have grappled with, and multiple times over the last week it's come up around me of people questioning the possibilities of the what-ifs, of the unknowns, of how people might be able to bring things that can't be explained by science into the world, to help people, to help things right now. And I want to dive into that because I think it's an interesting space that we find ourselves in. And this is true, just as true for me as it is anyone else, where we are currently existing within a society where science is valued, absolutely, as it should be. There is so much value in the science that has been done, is being done in terms of helping us understand our realities, understand our lives, understand our bodies, understand the earth and our existence. But there's a lot of things that we still can't explain through the techniques, through the science that we have available to us right now. And that just brings me back to this question that I keep just wanting to pose to you all, of the idea of the what-ifs, the unknowns, the possibilities of just because we can't prove something is what it is right now, what's the harm? And I think that's the important point that I want to make before diving into today's episode is I don't for any moment want to suggest that we should be ignoring science and just focusing on spirituality or therapies or healings or anything else where there isn't scientific proof of. But I do think we're at this precipice now needing to open our minds up of the idea that the science in how we currently do it can't help us propel ourselves forward in all ways, in understanding our existence, in understanding what is happening in the world, in understanding our future, and in opening us up to the possibilities that could really help us and all of us, humanity, all living beings, our planet itself. And obviously that is what I talk about a fair bit on this podcast, is the what-ifs. But I really want to focus today on that tension between those two and how, as people that exist within structures and systems that have embedded within us right from our schooling days, that our education system is set up to condition us into believing things that can be controlled. And I know that's challenging to hear. It's challenging for me to reckon with. That it's hard to change that. It's hard to be open to alternatives. It's hard to even consider the possibilities because we've internalized one is right and the other is wrong. We've internalized that one is respected and the other one is woo-woo. And my worry here is manifold, actually. I think we're missing so much possibility, so much potential. And I want to dive into some of that today. And I also think there's a part of this shift in that space that we need to open up to be able to navigate what is to come for us in the most open way possible, where what might show up for us on a personal level, on a global level, will be less challenging, but being open to the possibility of the what-ifs, by the faith and hope and belief that there is something greater than ourselves. And as I just said that sentence, I can't believe that I am here recording this podcast 12 months ago. This just would blow my mind that this is the podcast episode I'm recording today. So I want to walk that line really carefully, and I want to be respectful of where everyone is at in their own journey, in their own spiritual awakening or beforehand. But the point of this podcast is to challenge you all, to make you think about the possibilities, about the what-ifs, and to try and start to crack open the conditioning that we have all grown up in. And by doing that, I think there's so much potential on the other side of this. So I just want to start with, again, re-emphasizing the fact that science has been so valuable to us as humans in helping us understand the things around us. And I do not want anyone to take that from this podcast. I am a scientist. I have spent the better part of the last 2 decades learning science and practicing the science that I've learnt to help living beings. I think that is so important and should continue. So that is the key thing here. But the other key thing, and I am just as guilty of this as anyone else, is this idea that because we believe in science, that we refuse to believe in anything that not only can't be proven, but can't be disproven by science. And it's as soon as anything steps outside of that scope of what can be proven by science or what has been proven by science that we put up this wall, we put up this resistance. And for some of us, it's even to the level of there might be some evidence, but it's not strong enough evidence. So therefore, there's nothing to see here. And again, all of us that have a science background or an academic background will know about evidence and the validity of evidence and how we can assess all of that. That is all still very true. Don't want to take away from that. But at the same time, just want us to just keep an open mind to the other possibilities, to the things that might be starting to surface in the scientific community, in the spiritual community, in our own lives, that we can't pack neatly into how we expect something to be proven, how we know something to be true. Because the reality is, and this is, I guess, the key message for today, is science is a way for us to prove what someone has believed to be true at some point in time. Someone has come up with a hypothesis and then tried to prove it or disprove it. And that hypothesis can only come from within, from a knowing that something is true or not true, and then being willing to do the work to prove or disprove that. And even just based on my own experiences over the last, let's just say 6 months, there are things that I have experienced that I wouldn't have believed 12 months ago, that I absolutely can't prove, but that I know to be true because I have lived them, I have experienced them, I have witnessed them. And that doesn't take away from their validity just because there is no scientific way to prove that what I had experienced is real. It is my own lived experience. And all of you, whether you're willing to admit it or not, will have had your own version of that, your own version of miracles, of serendipitous events, of connections that you just can't explain. So what I want us to start thinking about, particularly for those that might be resistant to this idea, is the fact that 10, 20, maybe even 2 years ago, we didn't know things that we know now. We couldn't prove things that we can now prove to be true across so many different areas. That doesn't make them any less true 10 or 20 years ago than they are today. It just means that science has evolved, that our scientific knowledge has evolved to be able to prove that today. The same is true for 10 to 20 years from today. We will be proving things. We will have science proving things that can't be proven or aren't being proven now. That doesn't make them less true now. And the whole point of science is to continually question and test the what ifs. What if I add this to this? What if this is real? What if we tried this particular treatment or this particular healing modality, and what would the outcomes be? The other part of this is, as those of us that work in this area know, science is very much funding driven, and funding comes from the structures and systems in which we exist. Funding comes for the things that those structures and systems want to be proving to be correct or reinforcing to be true. And that's great and that's valuable, and that has led to so much progress in so many areas. And at the same time, it means that areas that don't fall within that aren't valuable for whatever reason to those structures and systems or organizations or institutes, aren't receiving the funding. So they can't do the big blinded placebo-controlled trials that other areas of science might be able to do. They won't receive the same attention and recognition for the results of their studies as other areas might. And so even if we just think about it from a funding level, that limits the scope in which we can be proving things, that we can start to pursue the what-ifs, the unknowns. And there is the element of those structures and systems and how they might be trying to keep us stuck in the old ways, how that might be perpetuating what they need to stay in their position of power, be it financial benefit to the company and organization, be it control from a power and leadership point of view. The list is endless, and I have touched on that in previous episodes. But I think sometimes as scientists, we like to think that we can look at a scientific study and really assess the validity of it, really assess it for any bias. But we come from that within a very much a lens of the systems and structures in which we've been born, bred and raised in, and reinforced throughout our education. And I think sometimes we just need to take that step back and look bigger picture and actually start to ask some of the more challenging questions of what is the benefit of this science for the people? What is the benefit of the outcome of this study for whoever has funded it, for the organizations that might benefit from it, for the institutes that might benefit from this science? But also, just because we've found one thing that might be true in one particular area that might help one particular area, one drug that might help us in the treatment of cancer, does that not also mean there are other opportunities, other potentials out there that can either complement that or can be just as effective despite not having the same level of scientific rigor behind it at this point in time? You can see as I speak about this that I'm really challenged with what to say and how to say it, and really trying to be quite respectful of the scientific community of which I am a member. But I'm really starting to see through some of the cracks there and see through some of the ways in which I've been indoctrinated, how that has limited my openness to the possibilities of other options, of other alternatives, of the what-ifs. And I come to this conversation not to push one over the other by any means actually, but more so to just pose the possibility of what if we used science as it is currently and spirituality in combination? What are the possibilities or potentials of the unknowns, of the what-ifs, if we were to combine some of these modalities and actually truly be open to this? And I even think just at the very point of being open to that mindset, spirituality by definition is a way of giving us a meaning that is greater than ourselves, a connection to something that is greater to ourselves. And we know from science actually that is very much closely linked with even just emotional well-being. So what if we got out of our own way? What if we let go of this resistance to the possibilities, to open up to the potentials? What could that open us up to? Rather than judging or criticizing or making fun of those individuals that are trying to bring their spiritual practices into the world to help other people, mind you, and perpetuating that as almost as if they're evil and as if they're doing harm. What if we worked in unison? What if we combined all we have to offer as scientists with what they have to offer from a spiritual energy healing point of view? At the very least, what I know to be true is that whilst we hold the resistance that we do to these ideas, to these possibilities, that we're slowing our progress, that we can't possibly even start to find ways to prove these things to be true, to prove these things to be beneficial whilst we're resistant to them. Because right now, we're not even looking that direction. And if we are, we're only doing that to poke fun at those people. And do we really, as scientists, want to slow our progress in that way? Or could we start to invest some of our time and efforts and energy and resources and funding to actually be open and to explore the possibilities in the hope that that what if, in at least one of those occasions, although I believe it will be many more, could be truly powerful in some way to help either humanity, to help medicine, to help science, to help the earth, to help climate change, whatever it might be. Is that what if not worth opening up our minds to? I want to touch on some of my own experiences shortly, because I've certainly grappled with this in my own journey over the last few months. But one of the things I just want to speak to right now is the idea of universal consciousness. And for those that have spiritual practices in which they're connected to, there is this idea that there is a universal consciousness that we are all tapped into, that we all have access to. And many have linked that idea, that concept, to some of the great achievements, outcomes, advancements that have happened across the course of human history. From the greatest mathematicians to the greatest scientists to the greatest artists of all forms, and how they are tapping into something that is greater than themselves to bring that message into the world, to bring that science into the world, to bring that art into the world. And I know some of you connect deeply with some of these things, be it scientific discoveries, be it your favorite music artists. Think even just being open to that idea in itself, that there might be some people out in our world that already are tapped into this universal consciousness that are then able to bring messages and discoveries and art into existence that have helped to humanity forward in whatever way. And for those of us that are less conscious of that, that might be as simple as this idea of being in a flow state. And I know for a lot of us, getting in that state is very hard these days with the distractions and the way our brains are wired from all of those distractions to do. But think about those times for whatever it is for you. What is the thing that brings you into flow state where either you can just really birth something into the world? And that might look like a stream of consciousness that you don't know where it came from, be it in written form, song form, artistic form, a painting, some kind of art. It might be downloads that come to you at various points of time where you're like, I don't know where that came from, but whatever that message is that resonates, that is something that speaks to me as true. And a lot of these artists and scientists and mathematicians and athletes even talk about this flow state, speak to it as if it's the idea of something greater than themselves has taken over and they are simply letting it happen. So what is the worst thing that can happen? We as a society start to think that that's a possibility. That some of us might be open to receiving divine consciousness, universal consciousness, guidance, whatever it is that helps to propel us as a global society forward, that helps us make positive, meaningful change in the world. If we can just be open to that possibility in itself, let alone all the other potentials that are out there, I think we have such a huge potential to make such a huge shift in what we do, how we do it, what we believe, and even just how we connect to each other as humans. So I do want to share some of my own experiences around this because, as I've touched on a couple of times already, this is something I still grapple with at times. And I shared that when I did my recording after my first Reiki training session, and the idea that not only was I not going to tell anyone that I had gone and done that because of the judgment that I was scared of receiving, but that I'd walked into that session trying to be open based on the experiences that I had leading up to that, but still skeptical, still not understanding how I could channel healing through my body and feel that in the way that I did feel that, and receive healing from other people channeling that through their body and feel that in the way that I felt that. I think that's been the biggest part of my acceptance of anything is possible, is those experiences in my 2 Reiki training sessions, really, that have absolutely blown my mind. And there's been so many other things that I've spoken about on the podcast, the synchronicities, the messages, the connection with my grandmother, just following my intuition about something that was so big and scary to me and landing where I've landed, knowing that this is where I'm meant to be. The other side of all of that, I'm so much more open and accepting and believing in those possibilities, in the what-ifs, in the unknowns. And that makes me so excited for all that opens up for me just on a personal level. But that's why I do this podcast, because I want others to be open to this, so that not only can you experience the deep gratitude and that every day and every moment your life has to bring you, but I want us to open up possibilities that are not currently possible because of our resistance to them. And by far, my Reiki experience and journey that continues now is a huge part of that for me. I said in the last episode that I had recorded an episode on my level 2 training, and I'm still unsure how much of that I want to share because it feels so sacred. But what I do want to say in that topic, and right now, because it fits beautifully into this idea, is that there is no doubt in my mind, in my heart, in my knowing, that what I've experienced as part of my Reiki practices and training is real, is true, transformed my life. And I hope as I move into becoming a practitioner and practicing this healing form can transform other people's lives. And I don't go into that to disregard all of the other modalities of healing and medicine that there are. I want to work alongside of those in my Reiki practice to help, to make a difference, to help heal people and bring them back into balance. The other areas and ways in which these possibilities have come up for me, and things that just can't be proven in all of my spiritual practices now, be it when I'm doing my self-practice for Reiki, when I'm doing Reiki on others, either directly or by distance, when I'm meditating, I can feel the shift in energy. I can feel the energy moving through I'm sure some people out there might say that's in my mind, might say that's placebo maybe, and I'm making it up. But that has happened at times in which I am or was much more skeptical, in ways that has at times presented itself as something quite dramatic that was almost a bit scary in how dramatic it was, how much it showed up for me. The other thing that goes kind of hand in hand with my experiences with my Reiki practices is the feeling that I have when energy is moving through my body. And at times that is quite dramatic, actually. For those of you that might be familiar with the idea of a Kundalini awakening, I've had couple of those kind of experiences during meditative or other practices where energy moving up my chakra system, up my spinal column, has been so dramatic that my whole body starts to move quite dramatically. The first time that happened, I was still very early in this journey, still very skeptical, and certainly wasn't even aware of that possibility. The very first time it happened, it wasn't till after that experience that I kind of started looking it up and better understood what had happened. And so even in those experiences alone, in having the experiences I've had with Reiki, in feeling energy shift through my body, both when I'm doing my Reiki practices, but also in meditation, in my connections with other people, feeling the energy of other people, both those that are physically in the room for me or being able to tune in with people that aren't close to me in terms of physical presence, or feeling energy move through my body through meditation, having messages come in, having visualizations come in through meditation, through my Reiki practices. All of that would have been unfathomable to me even 6 months ago, and now is part of my daily experience and existence, and I'm so grateful for that. But I say that because without opening my mind to that possibility, none of this would have been possible. And I still have a long way to go on this journey, and I still am far from the most spiritual, connected, gifted being on this earth by a long way. But by opening myself up to that, not only have I had all of those experiences and connections, and I'm now so much more open to the possibilities, I am now a changed person as a result of that. And not just because of being more open and full of hope and faith and belief in something greater than myself. And I know that helps big time. But by doing the healing work I've done, I turn up every day now as a much more balanced, much happier, much more content, much more able to find joy version of myself than I have ever been in my whole life. And that is not because my life is less stressful. That is not because my life is better, more full of whatever society might tell me that my life needs to be full of. In fact, in some ways, I've got less of those things. It is because I've done that healing work that I am more balanced, that I'm able to then respond to the challenges that come up for me in a completely different way. Completely different way. Not all the time. We had this joke at work last week when I was getting quite frustrated with something, of someone going, what were you saying on your podcast this morning, Jonna? And I was like, yeah, okay, touche. I'm not perfect, but for the most part, I am a better version of myself. I still have a lot of healing to do, a lot of work to do on myself, a lot that I want to achieve, a lot that I want to give back to the world. But none of that, none of what has got me to this point, let's say 12 months ago to today, none of what has seen this transformation in myself has been embedded in any way in science. None of it. And yet I am a happier, healthier, balanced version of myself than I have ever been in my whole life. And I want that. I want that for other people. That's what this podcast is for. That is what the next part of my journey is for. And that is why I am putting this call out and this message out today for, is to start to crack open the idea of the what if beyond yourself. Because a lot of the what if questions have been around you as an individual, but what if as a society we consider the possibilities of other ways of making a difference? I touched on this in the last episode, this idea of how we turn up in the world and the vibration and energy in which we give out to the world having a ripple effect, of having the potential shift the future course of humanity. That's a really out there one, and I understand that, and it's still one I struggle with for all of the reasons I discussed last week. But what if? What's the harm? Worst case scenario, I just enjoy my life a little bit more. Hopefully those around me enjoy their experience of me a little bit more. But so much of this is based in energy in terms of the unknowns, the things that we can't prove. And I suspect one day areas of science like quantum physics and other modalities will start to prove this stuff. And I know there is science happening in this space currently. So maybe 10 years time, it will all be proven. So if we think about the idea of energy and how we can use energy to shift ourselves, to heal others, to actually change the vibration and consciousness of us all, of the earth herself. That's my musings for this week, I guess. And as I said, it's all been in response to people in my life questioning the validity of things that have happened around them. And funnily enough, maybe none of that's been directed at me, but I see it popping up. And I think as we navigate what is to come, be it in 2024 or the years that follow, and what I'm hearing out there and what I'm feeling into, there will be some of us that will up that resistance even more out of fear. And I think that's going to make our journeys more challenging. We know in all ways when we're resistant to an idea that makes things more challenging to navigate change. But when we're talking about something on such a great energetic potential, such a huge ability to have such an impact, I just hope that if this podcast can do one thing, it is open one of your minds up to the possibility of the what ifs. I think I'm going to wrap that up there. Thank you all so much for tuning in, sending you loads of love and light. And I will be back in your ears next week. Bye, everyone.